Sup, sobers? We're back in 1965. Dude's out drinking with this young lady named Ivy Rose. They're out having a great night, drinking, partying, hitting the bars. One thing leads to another. They decide, let's move this party back to the hotel. Hotel, holiday. One thing leads to another. They find themselves back at the hotel. They're hanging out, drinking more, enjoying each other's company. Maybe a little, hanky-panky. Everything seems fine. But when the guy wakes up the next morning, the girl he just spent the entire night hanging out with, partying with, enjoying her company, well, she's dead. And that's all thanks to the goat of alcoholism, Gilbert Paul Jordan. Let's check out the story. Now, when you think of murder, you're probably thinking of murder weapons like guns and like knives, axes, random blunt force objects, bombs, poison. But I don't know if you're necessarily thinking of alcohol as a murder weapon. Now, the story I'm covering today does include topics like grape and, unaliving and things to do with kids, being inappropriate around kids. So if that is triggering for you, or it's not something that you're necessarily interested in, or if it's just too much for you, that's totally okay. No judgment. Some of these stories can be a little bit traumatic, but take care of yourself first, and remember that we'll be back next week with a different story. Just a little trigger warning, so you guys are aware of what's to come. But if that's too much for you, feel free to skip ahead or skip this episode altogether. But let's get into the story, you guys. All right, now we're going to talk about the goat of alcoholism. In my opinion, this guy was the greatest alcoholic to have ever lived. And I don't mean that in a positive way. I mean, this guy was really, truly sad. And doing all the research I did on this story, I was just like, WTF, bro. Whoa, dude. Come on. So, yeah, I mean, this guy was intense. This guy was off the rails. This guy literally was the biggest alcoholic I've ever heard of. And that's coming from somebody who is an alcoholic. So, and I've been to meetings. I mean, I've been to lots of meetings. I've heard some crazy stories. And this dude beats all of them, for sure. But let's go ahead and get into the story. The goat that we're talking about today is Gilbert Paul Jordan. Now, that's how he's famously known. He actually changed his name. His original name, his birth name, government name was Gilbert Paul Elsey. Very similar. Changed his last name, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Gilbert Paul Elsey was born in 1931 on December 12th. So, because of the age of this case, there's unfortunately not a ton of photographic evidence or any pictures of the case. The majority of the research and the majority of the pictures and any other stuff that I found on this case was all based on newspaper reports from mostly the Vancouver Sun. So a lot of newspaper clippings, a lot of newspaper stuff that I was reading through. That's the majority of the information that we have. So there's not a ton of photos, unfortunately, for me to share with you guys. And the evidence about the cases, about all the victims, is fairly limited for a few reasons. And we'll get into that later as well. But he was born December 12th, 1931. Mom and dad were Jack and Winifred. I never heard that name before. Winifred? I don't know. But they ended up getting divorced at an early age. So, coming from a broken home, he did have one brother. According to his brother, they did some research, did some interviews with him, kind of asking him about his home life to get some insight into kind of like the mindset and the home life of the goat of alcoholism. And his brother reported that it's a fairly normal household. They grew up feeling loved, safe, had the things they wanted. And Gilbert Paul Jordan also says the same thing. He says that his parents were great. He had a pretty normal childhood. And if you follow a lot of true crime like I do, you know that the place that a person grows up in it heavily affects what they turn out to be. And especially with serial killers and murderers, they're always trying to figure out, like, what went wrong? Where'd things go wrong? Where'd they go off the rails? What happened? It's valid that they were looking into his past and looking into his childhood, but unfortunately, it seems like he had a pretty good childhood. Where things started to take a dark turn was at about the age of 13. Looks like that's when he first started getting into drinking, hanging out with maybe the wrong crowd. It's said that by the age of 16, Gilbert was a full-blown alcoholic. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. 16! Too drunk to drive before he even had a license. Now, it said once he started drinking, he dropped out of school. Obviously, why go to school when you could just drink? And I mean, this is a long time ago. My grandpa grew up around the same time period, and that was a pretty normal thing to do. I mean, a lot of kids were just dropping out of school, going into workforce, trying to make money for their families and stuff. They're just coming out of the Great Depression, things like that. So not super like out of the ordinary, but I do think that the drinking piece definitely led to the dropping out. So, I mean, just starting off real bad already. Age of 13, things are already going wrong. Now, like I mentioned before, he was a full-blown alcoholic by 16. This is also about the same time boys start developing their sexual urges. And it said that he developed these like insatiable sexual urges. And at the age of 16, already started going down to a local area called Skid Row. I mean, pretty sure you know what that is. Skid Row is essentially just a drug, alcohol-infested, homeless wasteland for people who are down on their luck, so to speak. And just a place where a lot of bad things tend to happen. So he's out on Skid Row, walking around at the age of 16, trying to satiate these urges, trying to take care of himself, wasted out of his mind all of the time. And I think that this is where he starts to build up this persona. He's starting to build up this life that he's going to end up leading. Now, if you're a drinker, if you are someone who parties a lot, you've probably been exposed to alcohol causing trouble. You go out drinking, one of your friends gets arrested for something, people get into fights, couples end up fighting. Like, crazy stuff happens when alcohol gets involved. We already know this. Well, the same is true for the GOAT. He goes out and starts drinking at the age of 13, becomes full-blown alcoholic by 16. He starts getting into serious legal trouble starting in 1950. As you would expect, he dropped out of school, he's drunk all the time, he has habits to support, he's a young guy out trying to figure out his place in the world. He's obviously going to go try and figure out how to make money, how to start taking care of himself and start providing for himself. How's he going to do that? Well, I'll tell you. He starts a crime spree. Now, this crime spree is going to go all the way to 2006 when he dies. So just keep that in mind. Looks like July 17th, 1950 was the first time he ever was in trouble with the law. Got in trouble for car theft. Spent a total of 12 months in jail, which is a good start, right? Now, I just want you guys to take a quick look at this. Look at all of these charges we're about to go through. The amount of charges on this dude's rap sheet it's a laundry list. It's a freaking, I can't even imagine somebody being in trouble this much and still being able to walk free. Just absolutely bonkers to me. But as we'll get into it, you'll see it seems like the judicial system, for whatever reason, the Canadian judicial system just shit the bed on this one. Just really shit their pants in the bed all over the place. Yeah. Now we can assume car theft probably either needed the money or needed the car. Very obvious. Okay, sure. Stole the car, got convicted, spent a year in jail for that. Looks like the next charge he got was 4 years later. On June 8th, 1954, he's arrested again for breaking and entering, as well as another car theft. But for some reason, those charges were dismissed. Why were those charges dismissed? Well, we're not really sure. On July 13th, 1958, he was convicted again of theft, breaking and entering in the University of British Columbia. And for whatever reason, that case was dismissed. So maybe they didn't have enough evidence. Not really sure. There wasn't a lot of details on a lot of his criminal history. However, we do know that he was only fined $60 for this offense, which, I mean, that's I mean, I guess it was back in the day. So $60 isn't like it is today. $60 isn't shit today, but $60 back then might have been like the equivalent of like $350, $400 today. I'm not really sure. I'm not an economist, but still seems kind of low. Maybe he didn't steal anything serious. I don't know. Either way, still getting off scot-free, it seems like. Then a little over a year later, September 25th, 1959, he's convicted again for car theft. Dude loves stealing cars, man. I don't get it. Why? You just got to get around. Like, can't get your license because you're drunk all the time. So you just got to get around, got to steal cars. Sounds like he's stealing a lot, probably trying to support himself and his habits. But it doesn't say anything about him working during this period of time. It doesn't seem like he's able to hold down a job. Doesn't seem like he's able to do a whole lot other than steal and get wasted. Now, for this car theft, he was actually convicted and sentenced to a year in jail. Still seems kind of light to me, but a year in jail. So that'll get us up to 1960. However, literally a year in jail, not even a month later after getting out, on October 13th, 1960, he's convicted again for theft under $50. Now, theft under $50, who knows what that is? He was reported for stealing something, probably personal property. I'm not really sure. He got that charge dismissed. Must not have been concrete evidence, but cannot even last a month out of prison or jail before he starts getting back to it. Now, our boy may not have graduated from a traditional school. He didn't go to high school, but he graduated all right. He graduated from petty theft crimes all the way on up to big boy felony status crimes. In 1961, December 7th specifically, police are driving by when they notice a random car pulled over in a ditch somewhere. They pull up behind the car. They inspect to see what's going on when they notice Gilbert Paul Jordan in the driver's seat. He's got a 5-year-old girl with him. Now, the events leading up to this and involving this whole abduction situation are not really very well laid out. Not very much known about it. Kind of murky. But what we do know is that he abducted a 5-year-old girl, an indigenous little girl, and kidnapped her. And it's unclear whether anything sexual happened. Hopefully not. But he was then arrested and prosecuted for abduction of a 5-year-old. And for whatever reason, these charges go into what is called a stay of proceedings. Essentially what that means is they don't have enough evidence, or they're still gathering enough evidence to be able to lay a solid foundation for the prosecution to actually try the case in court. Sometimes they don't end up getting enough evidence to try the case in court, or they just need more time to gather more evidence. So they'll stay the proceedings in order to do that. In this case, however, it was just stayed and never revisited. So essentially, he was never tried for it. He was never found guilty of it. He was never convicted for it. Essentially got away with abducting a 5-year-old little girl. But clearly escalating from simple car thefts, small petty thefts here and there, drunken disorderly issues, now graduating up to kidnapping, abduction, more serious crimes. We're seeing a pattern of escalation is what we're starting to see emerge here. Now, even though he did get away with these charges, the stay of proceedings kind of kept it so he didn't have to face any charges for the abduction of this 5-year-old girl. It does seem like this did affect him in a pretty personal way. On December 27th in 1961, this is roughly 20 days after the abduction, after being arrested for it, Jordan is found on the Lionsgate Bridge attempting or threatening to take his own life. And police are obviously called because he's holding up traffic on this bridge, threatening to kill himself, causing a scene. And he's obviously very intoxicated. But obviously he was going through some intense emotions, and it seems that it was related to the abduction of this little girl. We're not sure if maybe he had just a lot of remorse, or maybe he was having like just a moment of serious depression, realizing what direction his life has been going. Not too sure. There's not a lot of details surrounding it, but it does seem like it's related to this whole abduction case that he was just recently involved with. Unfortunately, police were not able to talk him off this ledge. They tried really hard to convince him to come down off this ledge, but they just couldn't. The one person, and we'll find this is a common theme throughout the rest of the story, the one person that he went to and was able to help get him off this ledge, his lawyer. Yep, he's the guy. Now, this whole Lionsgate Bridge incident, he was charged with public intoxication, but maybe the cops just felt bad for him. Maybe they just had no real reasonable reason to charge him for anything. Maybe he's just a smooth talker. I don't know. But the charges were withdrawn. He wasn't actually charged for public intoxication, and nothing ended up coming of anything from this, really. The GOAT faced some charges for public intoxication. While in court for said charges, he starts acting a fool in court. He starts doing things, just making a scene. He's reported to have given a Nazi salute to the court magistrate during the court proceedings. And for all of this, the charges were withdrawn for the public intoxication charge, but he was charged for contempt of court and was thrown in jail for 6 months. So, I mean, like, you guys, your court proceedings, your court system, your punishments, they don't even make any sense, yo. Like, what? But the world would see 6 months without the GOAT on the streets, wreaking havoc like he has been. However, he would be released. It wasn't very much longer after that he'd find himself back in trouble again. On March 26, 1962, it's said that he went down to Skid Row, his favorite place to go scouting, looking for babes. And it said that he lured a couple of women, likely prostitutes, into his car with the promise of alcohol. Ooh, let's go have a good time. And he lured them into his car. They ended up driving down to Cole Harbor, where they parked. They ended up getting super drunk, hanging out. And at some point, one of the girls decided that she was needing some fresh air from the car that they were in. So she decided, yo, I got to get out of this car. Like, it's getting hot. The windows are fogging up. I need some fresh air. So she opens up the door, hops out, and immediately Jordan slams the door back shut with the other girl inside and speeds off with this girl in the car. The other girl's like, what just happened? She's freaking out because her friend is in the car still, and she has no idea who this guy is. And on top of that, she's wasted. So I can't even imagine what was going through her mind. Now, it's said that the GOAT drove from here up to northern Vancouver. Somewhere along the way, he stopped, he parked the car, he raped this poor woman, and then pushed her out of the car, but kept her purse, and the other girl's purse was still in the car. And then he sped off, just leaving her in the street. Get out of my car. Left her in the street. Like a freaking animal. Obviously, the girl that was left behind reported this incident. She reported him. He was found. They arrested him. They charged him with 2 counts of rape, as well as 2 counts of theft, because obviously he stole both their purses. Now, get this. The freaking Canadian judicial system, dude. Like, I don't even get it. What is happening? He was acquitted of the rape charges, but he was found guilty of possessing both purses, aka he was found guilty of the theft charges. Now, he was sentenced to 2 years in jail for the theft charges. He appealed the conviction. Obviously, why wouldn't you appeal it? Yeah, sure. He wins his appeal. So, doesn't spend much time in jail at all. Definitely not the 2 years. He was acquitted of the grape charges. So, basically got off scot-free for abducting, raping, and assaulting 2 women. This is coming from somebody who is an alcoholic, who's been to jail, who has been through some shit. I wouldn't be here if I didn't go to jail. The court systems have reformed me, and maybe it's so hard for people like me nowadays because people like the GOAT got off so easy for so long and they realize they got to change some shit, man. But let me tell you, going into jail and having that process to work through and realizing where I was and what I did to get there, it was a moment of clarity for me where I realized, like, I got to get my poop in a group here. With this judicial system consistently, what I would say is enabling him. They're simply enabling him to keep going back out and keep committing these crimes. And not only that, they're further improving and growing his confidence for committing these crimes, because no matter what he does, he seems to always get away with it, or at least doesn't get punished to the extent that he should for it. So he's starting to see this pattern of, I can do whatever the fuck I want to do. And that, to me, is probably the ultimate crime in this case, because he just keeps getting a pass. He gets to get out of jail free, and then he gets to collect $200, and then keep on keeping on. So the GOAT's just unstoppable at this point. And he's committed some pretty heinous crimes, and he's now graduated from abduction to now physical assault, as well as rape, and yet again abducting 2 females, not just one. So the escalation is continuing to grow. Now, with all this continued escalation, I know you guys are just waiting for it. When's it going to happen? It's got to be coming soon. Well, it's 1965 now, and the GOAT has met young Ivy Rose Oswald. Ivy's a 52-year-old switchboard operator, which I was like, what the fuck is a switchboard operator? That sounds really not only boring, but also like, is that a thing? I don't know what that is. So don't worry, I looked it up for you guys. A switchboard operator is mostly a job that is pretty much gone now because it's been replaced by automated telephone trees. But essentially, when you used to call places and you'd need information, but instead of having the automated phone system that says, press 4 to go here, you'd speak to a real person, and they would be the operator, and they would send you to different places. So she was a switchboard operator. She was a phone operator, basically. And I'm not sure what company she worked for. Yeah, not sure what company she worked for, but she was a switchboard operator. She was 52 years old, and it sounds like she met the GOAT out just a night of drinking out at one of the local bars. Just he's prowling around on Skid Row like normal. Now, one thing's for sure, our boy the GOAT, man, he must be a smooth talker, because he seems to be able to just like schmooze his way in with ladies. He seems to just, I don't know, he must be a smooth talker, because he's not much of a looker in my opinion. But anyways, Ivy is out having some drinks at the bars, ends up running into our boy the GOAT, and decides that they hit it off really well. They're having a good time, and she ends up inviting him back to her Vancouver hotel, and they're just gonna have, some more drinks, an innocent night of fun, maybe have a little sex, new normal adult stuff, going out drinking, partying, having fun. But what she doesn't know is that it may not end so great for her. It's said that Ivy was already pretty drunk by this point before even going back to the hotel. But obviously they went back to the hotel, continued to drink, and it's not 100% sure, certain what happened during this time period. But we can assume that the GOAT went back, they were drinking, having a good time. And even though she was probably past the point of being really drunk, he was probably continuing to offer her drinks and force her to drink with him, to the point where she ends up dying of alcohol poisoning the next morning. Now, in order to die from alcohol poisoning, your blood alcohol level has to be at 0.35%. Now, the legal limit for driving is 0.08%. And typical, drunken effects are going to occur at about 0.15. You're going to feel pretty drunk at that point. It's said that about 0.25 is when most people are going to pass out or fall asleep or even black out, lose consciousness. Not necessarily be unconscious, but be in that blacked out state where they don't know what's going on. You know what I'm talking about. You guys all have a friend. But at 0.35% alcohol blood level, you dead. Your body is just overloaded with alcohol. You're now alcohol poisoned. Your body shuts down. So to get to that point is not easy. I mean, you have to drink through blackout. You have to drink so much alcohol in a short period of time that your body physically is overloaded. So obviously, for her to be dead from alcohol poisoning She had to have a lot to drink. She had to drink a lot that night. And she's hanging out with our boy the goat, so you know they was drinking. This brings us back to where we started in our story. Obviously, when he woke up next to her, he knew that she drank too much. He knew she was dead because he made her drink too much booze. But he also is a smart guy. He knew that there's no evidence of foul play. He knew that there was no reason why they would suspect that he killed her in any way. So what does he do? Well, he reaches out to his good old boy, his lawyer. Not the police. No. Why would you call the police? He's got to call his lawyer first. He explains to his lawyer, look, man, like I was just drinking with this chick. I don't know what happened. She must have drank too much. She just died, man. Like, I don't know. We both went to bed. We had some sex last night. Everything was normal. I woke up. She's dead, bro. So his lawyer's like, well, man, like, it's okay. Like, you're good. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're dealing with this tragedy. Are you okay? Like, wondering if he's all right. You look, man, the first thing you need to do is call the police, all right? You got to let them know that this poor she's died. There's nothing for you to worry about because you didn't do anything wrong. She just overdosed, okay? You're all right. So he hangs up the phone and he dials 911, calls the police, lets them know what happened. Police are sent over. They do some investigating. They realize that poor Ivy has a blood alcohol level of 0.37%. So definitely enough to be dead from alcohol. And she's also half naked. So, you know, that's why we're assuming that they did in fact have sex that night. But the police don't suspect anything. They think that it's a pretty normal situation. She was out partying, had too much to drink, unfortunately couldn't handle it, ended up dying, alcohol poisoning. It's something that I wouldn't say they see often, but with no signs of foul play, what are they going to assume? Like, they're not going to assume that she was murdered. There's no signs of a struggle. There's no marks on her. There's no blood. There's no weapons of any kind. There's nothing. There's no signs or symptoms. She just died from an overdose, man. Now, this is a significant moment for the GOAT because he is now faced with the realization that he can get away with this. He realizes that this sick, insatiable urge to kill that he has can be fulfilled without even getting caught. So obviously, I mean, this is going to do nothing but fuel him even more. He's going to start doing even more. He's already escalated from petty theft to abduction to grape, now to unaliving. So we've gone the full gamut here. He's all the way at the top now, as high as he can be. And it's only safe to assume that he's developed this new insatiable urge to where he is now needing this. Now, it's believed that he didn't actually intend to kill Ivy that night when he was staying with her. First of all, her alcohol levels were not outrageously high. It was a pretty close to like those levels that you'd just barely pass having just drank too much and being poisoned. So it's thought that maybe he didn't necessarily intend to kill her. However, after experiencing that situation, he realized, yo, there's something here. I could do this. He got a lot of media attention after this. Obviously, I mean, this young girl died. There was a whole investigation. He was reported to be with her. He got some news media attention. And obviously his family has been getting news media attention because of all the previous crimes he's been through, all of the previous times he's been involved with pretty interesting stories that are likely getting attention in the community. So because of this, it's said that he decides that he wants to kind of lay low. He's like, things are getting too heated up. I don't want this kind of heat on me right now. And it sounds like he really did care about his brother and his parents. He didn't really want that kind of negative media attention in their life. So it sounds like he started to straighten up the best he could anyways. Not really, but he did it the best he could to try and save his family from having to experience so much just like negative publicity. But what I mean is that he just wasn't killing people. He was still breaking the law in many different ways. So let's go through a couple of those. On December 10th, 1966, it said that he got involved in a hit and run. Now, of course, he was acquitted of this hit and run charge. Why would he get charged for anything? Why would he get convicted for anything? Why? Why would he ever face the music? So, hit and run charge, released, acquitted, no issue. On February 9th, 1967, it sounds like he unlawfully had some alcohol at a Vancouver restaurant. Now, I think this was like terms of his previous court cases. Probably wasn't allowed to have alcohol, and I'm not sure exactly the details behind this, but it sounds like he was reported to be drinking at this restaurant and then was arrested for it. He was hit with a whopping $50 fine. Yeah, big time. Now, fast forward another year. Looks like he was convicted in February of 1967 of drinking and driving. Now, I'm kind of surprised it took this long to get him a DUI, but finally got a DUI charge under his belt. He was fined $250. Woo! And his license was suspended for 1 year. Do you think that probably mattered? No, probably didn't matter at all. Later in November, same year, he's convicted for another charge of robbery in Vancouver. However, those charges are dropped and nothing happens with that. Fast forward to January of 1969, yet again, convicted of drinking and driving, another DUI, already had a DUI, was already suspended for a year. This seems to have fallen within that same year, but for whatever reason, he was only fined another $250 and was had his license suspended for another 6 months. What's going on here? January 30th, 1969, he's arrested for assault. That charge is dismissed. March 31st, 1969, he's arrested for attempting to obstruct justice, resisting arrest or something probably. February 5th, 1971, he's arrested for car theft. For whatever reason, that charge is withdrawn, but he was charged with theft of an item under $50. Which is likely because there was something in the car that he stole that they had proof that he stole, so they actually charged him with the theft under $50. For this, he was actually given 30 days in jail for the $50 theft thing. 30 days in jail. What? That was on February 5th. 30 days in jail, that's going to bring us up to what? About March 5th? Yeah, March 5th, which just so happens to be the date that he steals a car and is arrested again and charged with car theft. The dude just can't stop. Now, they hit him with a $300 fine. Big time. That's going to keep him from doing it again for sure, 100%. On May 3rd, 1971, he's involved in a car chase where he's arrested and given another DUI. You want to know how much he was fined? Yeah, $100. Okay. Just a few months later, September 15th, 1971, the dude's caught exposing himself in public and is arrested, but those charges are dismissed. 12 days later, he's arrested for possession of heroin. Not sure how that all came about, but this he's actually arrested for and charged with. It looks like the possession of heroin got him 12 months probation. Looks like because of this probation period, he had a little bit of time where he wasn't fucking up, wasn't messing around. And so we get all the way up to 1973. Now, in this time period, the GOAT starts dating, man. He's dating a girl. Now, up until this point, he doesn't seem to really have many girlfriends. It seems like it's a lot of meaningless sex, a lot of sex workers, a lot of prostitution stuff. It seems like it's just a lot of him going out and doing random hookups and stuff. There's not been a serious love interest up until this point. In 1971, he meets a young lady named Renona, and they hit it off pretty well. She has no history of sex work. She's a recent divorcee, and she is, I don't know, an indigenous woman, it seems to be the GOAT's type. So, right up his alley. They hit it off really well, and for whatever reason, this relationship seems to blossom, at least at the start. Despite things going so well, and them hitting it off so well, and everything seemingly being so perfect between the two of them, Gilbert ends up sleeping around with sex workers. He has these insatiable urges that he can't control, and he ends up sleeping around behind her back. And not only that, but in 1973, he finds himself involved in not one, but 3 different sex crimes, which is obviously going to cause trouble in paradise. Now, the first of these charges, the report that I read says that he invited a group of local kids over to his house. Now, what does that mean? Like, there's just groups of local kids, just like, is there like a place you go, like a forum or like a PTO group or something, where you just like find these groups of kids to invite over to your house? That to me was confusing, but somehow he finds this group of local kids and invites them over to his house. I'm not sure if it was through maybe a church organization, or like maybe it was somebody that he knew through Renona's contacts. I really don't understand where these groups of kids came from. It said that he invited this group of kids over, and while these kids were over to watch a movie and hang out at their house, he, out of nowhere, just comes out and exposes himself to these kids. Now, we're not sure how he's caught for this, but he is arrested. He is charged with indecent exposure, and it doesn't seem like he faced any charges for this crime. It doesn't seem like they, yet again, did anything about this. Then 7 months later, he's driving down the road at some point. He sees a young lady who is walking along the side of the road. He stops, pulls over, says, "Hey, what's going on? Do you need any help?" He offers her a ride. She gets in the car. He starts driving down and takes a turn down this long, deserted looking, dark, scary, like I'm going to die road. And obviously the young lady begins to get panicked. She starts freaking out and starts to fear for her life. Once he stops the car, she tries to get out of the car, but he locks the doors, and not sure how he kind of forces it on her, but then forces her to perform oral sex on him while this car is stopped. After he assaulted her, it seems like another car had driven by, and it had distracted him a little bit, kind of spooked him a little bit, so he got a little distracted. And in the time that he got distracted, the young lady was able to unlock the car door and get out of the car and run away. It was then that she obviously went and reported him, and he was then charged with assault as well as abduction, a sexual assault charge. Luckily, that young lady was able to get free and nothing worse happened to her. That's all I have to say. Just about at the end of 1973, Gilbert's leaving the supermarket after picking up some groceries. He's driving past a liquor store, and he notices that there is a woman standing out in the cold, and he offers to give her a ride. It seems like she was out like waiting for a cab or something, and so he was just being kind, stopped by and said, "Hey, can I give you a ride?" He says, "I just need to swing by my house real quick and drop these groceries off, and then we can swing by and I'll drop you off." So they swing by his house. As a thank you, the nice lady, she helps him carry his groceries into the house. Once they're inside, he's like, "Hey, you want to have a drink? Like, we can get some hot buttered rum. It's cold outside." So he makes her up this hot buttered rum drink. The two of them get real drunk together. They're hanging out, they're shooting back drinks. At some point, she loses consciousness because she obviously drank too much. And it's at this time that the goat decides that he's going to go ahead and take full advantage of her. So he undresses her and takes her into the bathroom where he sexually assaults her. At some point, the young lady comes back from being blacked out. She regains consciousness. And while she regains consciousness, it's while this assault is happening. So instead of freaking out or risking her life in any way, she kind of allows the assault to finish. And then once he falls asleep later on, she quickly sneaks out of the house and gets as far away from him as possible. Because of these assault charges that he was facing, I mean, obviously both women reported him and he was charged with these crimes. He was convicted. It's not 100% sure exactly what all happened in the courtrooms, but he was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison for the assault. However, he appealed the conviction, and it was reduced to 6 months with 1 year probation. Now, as you can imagine, this is only going to further fuel and fill him with confidence. This is only going to further exacerbate the problem. This is only going to make him feel like he's untouchable. And that's exactly what happens. Now, I just want to remind you that the entire time these assaults and all these things are happening, he's still with this young woman, Renona. Now, he wasn't just violent to these random strangers. He was also violent to Renona at home. He had actually hospitalized her multiple times. And there was one specific time where he had hospitalized her, and he was trying to go in and see her in the hospital, but the hospital staff was keeping him from going in. They knew that these injuries were caused by him, and she'd also expressed that she was concerned for her safety because of him. So the hospital staff was doing everything they could to try and keep him from seeing her, being able to visit her, being able to have any sort of control over her. And good for them. Way to go, hospital staff. It said that he would call into the hospital regularly, like just ranting, freaking out, demanding that they release her. And they would obviously refuse because she needed medical treatment. And we're not going to release her to you because you're a psycho. So he was doing all these crazy things to try and get her out of this hospital. Since he wasn't making any headway there, it sounds like he went out and he took his frustrations out on these poor women, where he ended up assaulting them. And then he ended up getting incarcerated for the 2 years, which was then dropped to 6 months. And he was released sometime in 1974. Now, upon his release, he went right back out, went right back to it. Don't waste no time. Unfortunately, within the same month of him being released, his girlfriend Renona found herself back in the hospital. It's not quite sure why she stayed in this relationship up to this point. I mean, girl, get out. What are you doing with this fool? This guy's he's a mess. But she was still with him. She finds herself back in the hospital. And Gilbert was known to the hospital staff. I mean, these guys knew him. They've already dealt with him previously. So he was not allowed to see his wife when she was in the hospital, or his girlfriend when she was in the hospital. He was not allowed to go visit her. He was not allowed to have anything to do with her. Hospital staff knew his face, and they tried very hard to keep him out. However, the GOAT is determined, and he's drunk all the time. So he's going to do stuff that you're just like, what? That's crazy, dude. And he sure does. He decides he's going to dress up in a disguise. He's going to go in there, and he's going to break her ass out. I am going to bust her out of this hospital. But security quickly realizes that this dude's wearing a disguise, and they bust him and keep him from entering into the hospital. Now, thank God this happened, because Renona was now allowed to actually go through her full recovery in peace and didn't have to worry about the GOAT messing up things for her anymore. Now, this was the time that she needed to finally realize, like, okay, I need to get away from this guy. So it sounds like she must have asked for some serious help. It sounds like the police actually were involved in trying to escort her out of the state on an aircraft. So she used this police escort. She was going to leave, and it sounds like she was headed on a flight to California. Somehow Gilbert found this out. He's freaking out. He's desperately trying to keep her in Canada. And so what is he going to do? I mean, he's got no other options at this point. She's got a police escort. She's on her way out, but he's a desperate control freak. He needs it. He cannot handle it. He cannot lose her. So what does he do? He calls in a bomb threat to the plane that she's boarding to head to California. This dude's nuts. Now, obviously, he was arrested, endangering the safety of an aircraft. He was quickly charged, but because the plane never took off, they were unable to charge him and convict him of anything. So yet again, our boy walks free. Finally, in about 1976, Canada's Crown Council seems to finally be pulling their heads out of their ass, and they start to realize, like, this guy might be a problem. This guy might actually be a dangerous sex offender. So they open up an investigation, and they're opening up an investigation to decide whether or not to consider Gilbert a DSO, which is a dangerous sex offender. Now, if they do declare him a dangerous sex offender, this will allow him to be kept in prison for a much longer period of time. However, if he's not found to be a dangerous sex offender, he will be released. Very important day. This is a very important decision. So in order to help him with this decision, they enlist the help of some psychologists, some psychiatrists. There's a few over the years that have worked with him and done some evaluations on him, just through his stints in jail and having to go through different evaluations for all of his different criminal records and all that. One of those doctors is Dr. Whitman. Now, this guy does his analysis and figures that what Gilbert Paul Jordan is suffering from is antisocial personality disorder, as well as like heightened sexual deviance. Now, as part of this investigation, Gilbert's attorneys also hired a doctor to do an evaluation on him. This doctor decided that he did exhibit signs of psychopathy. Dr. Whitman decided that he exhibits signs of antisocial personality disorder. Now, antisocial personality disorder usually deals more with deceitfulness, manipulation. It's more of a personality as opposed to like exhibiting violent tendencies. However, it does lead to violent tendencies. Psychopathy also leads to violent tendencies. However, the two are very different. It's when the two are combined, when somebody exhibits antisocial personality disorder as well as psychopathy, that's when the state considers them to be a pretty serious threat to society. But if both of those things are not found to be true, then it can be argued that he's maybe a threat for certain reasons, but not necessarily a violent threat to society. So because of this, because he is deemed a psychopath and deemed to have antisocial personality disorder, they're trying to make the case that this guy is a very serious problem to send back into society. Like, you guys shouldn't send this guy back. Don't put him back on the streets, okay? Label him a dangerous sex offender. Let's get him some rehabilitation help, and let's make sure he doesn't do anything worse. These two doctors both evaluated our boy on different days. One evaluation was done 14 years prior. That was the doctor saying that he exhibited signs of psychopathy. Dr. Whitman, who was currently analyzing him, was asking for him to be reanalyzed, but Gilbert refused any sort of analysis, any sort of testing, any sort of anything. He refused to do anything. And because the 14-year diagnosis seemed so outdated to the court magistrate, they just didn't have it in them to convict him to the rest of his life being imprisoned for what could be a slightly outdated doctor's recommendation or doctor's opinion. So for this reason, in November of 1976, they did not label him a dangerous sex offender, and he was allowed to walk free back into society, back free to cause more trouble. And it's only going to lead to deeper, darker, worse things happening. Now, I hate to say it, but it sounds like these guys made the wrong call, because our story is only just beginning. But we're going to go ahead and stop. This will be part one of hopefully a 2-part series. Might end up being a 3-part series. I've got quite a few notes here. But we're going to go ahead and pick up on the next episode here after he gets freed from the court system, before he becomes what we'll be knowing, or what he'll be known as, the boozing barber. So hopefully you guys enjoyed part one of this series, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the GOAT of alcoholism, Gilbert Paul Jordan's story. We will pick up where we left off next week, same time, same place. If you like the case coverage, if you like the story, feel free to drop some love below. Comments always help the algorithm. I'm trying to build up this channel. I'm trying to build up this series, so any sort of help that you guys can provide, I am super happy about it. Throw some likes in there, hit that subscribe button, share it to your friends. And if you have any other cases that you want me to cover, or anything else you want me to talk about, I'm always down for ideas and comments and anything else. Similarly, if you or somebody you know is struggling with alcoholism or an addiction problem, some sort of substance abuse issue, definitely reach out, share my page with them. You never know how much you could actually do just by reaching out and letting somebody know that you care, you're just thinking about them. People struggle with substance abuse, you guys, and the one reason I'm sharing these stories is to just exemplify just how serious addiction is. And I mean, this story is crazy, but on top of it all, it's truly sad and tragic. I mean, this poor guy was a victim to alcohol his entire life. And one thing I wanted to touch on is that Gilbert started drinking at the age of 13. I started drinking at the age of 12. And as I was doing some research, there's something for people who start drinking early on in their lives. It's called early onset alcoholism. And I'd say that I definitely developed that. I started drinking at the age of 12, and it wasn't long before I wouldn't say full blown alcoholic like Gilbert was, but I was definitely drinking every weekend. And not only that, but I was using alcohol to cope with my parents' divorce. I was using it to cope with any sort of life stresses, and it was more of a hiding mechanism. I would use it to just basically escape. I'd go to my friend's house, we would get drunk, I would use it as an escape. Early onset alcoholism is said to, after research has been done on it, it is said to be linked to a more violent case of alcoholism, if that makes sense, because you grow up your entire childhood never truly learning how to cope, always running from learning how to cope. And it said that early onset alcoholism can lead you to be more violent, more impulsive, as well as to have way less control over yourself and your impulses in terms of like your sexual urges or anything really. So early onset alcoholism does lead to extremely destructive behaviors. And having gone through that myself, I know that that's true for me. I know that my drinking became very violent. I became very violent. I became very angry, very volatile. And it looks like the same is true for Gilbert. He started drinking at 13, was fully involved in alcoholism by 16, and it seems like his life just continued to further solidify alcohol in his life, even though things just kept going wrong for him. So early onset alcoholism is a serious thing, and I think it leads to more serious versions of alcoholism than someone who finds alcohol later on in life, maybe develops an addiction later on in life. So that's just something I wanted to share with you guys, because it's something to keep in mind, especially if you are parents, you have kids. Try and keep your kids away from that stuff, and don't just try and tell them that it's bad. Like, try and get them to understand why it's bad, and get them to understand what's bad about it and why it can be so damaging and why it can be so dangerous for their health, for their lifestyle, for their future, for their development. And they're probably not going to listen to you because they're kids and they never do, but just something to keep in mind. I mean, just keep your eyes open for those early signs of, your child abusing alcohol, because I did it, and I know that it had really serious negative lasting consequences on my life because of that decision I made. My little tiny 12-year-old brain had no idea what I was doing. In retrospect now, can't believe that I was doing that kind of stuff, but yeah, just something I wanted to bring up. The purpose of this series is to help people, to show people that sobriety is a gift, and it is, in some cases, it can give you your life back. In other cases, it could save people's lives. Sobriety is hugely important, and if you are struggling or somebody you know is struggling, then certainly reach out, and I'm always happy to help if anybody is out there struggling, needs some help. But don't end up like our boy, the GOAT, Gilbert Paul Jordan here, because, I mean, this dude's life is just exhaustingly sad. But tune back in next week for part 2. I'm DJ Petrovsky. Later, sobers.